pray for Dr. Martin as he brings the word to us.
Well, what a joy to see you. This is Monday. Did you know that? Monday has its own doom and gloom, doesn't it? But it's good to be saved.
Amen.
The tomb was open on Sunday, but it was still open on Monday. So the blessings follow. You don't get shortchanged just because of the day of the week. Thank you, brother, for that presentation. Thank you so very much. We thank God for the printed page. It's amazing how much has been done since the inventing of the printing press. I think you can appreciate the little statement. The times and seasons are in his hands. It's amazing how much in this world people take for granted or take credit for it, when it's all the work of God. Look how many centuries people didn't have the printing press. And it was very expensive to get a parchment written. They were very rare. And then God gives somebody insight to a printing press. And then along about that same time frame in history, other things happen. The Roman Empire has collapsed. So there's no big dictator named Caesar telling little countries what they can't do. At the same time, the gospel is going forth. People are getting saved by the millions. And these new countries need constitutions. And so they write them. And in the Constitution, right and wrong is defined by the Bible. And for some 500 years, civilization makes advances in previous ages totally unimaginable. Couldn't even think of it. And now I happen to live in a generation that's decided that we don't need any of that. Just eat, drink, and be merry. What a tragedy. But I'm delighted that as a young boy, I came to know Christ as Savior. And the Christian life is wonderful. I wouldn't want to trade it for the wealthiest unsaved man in the world, or the most popular unsaved man in the world. Just to be a Christian. To walk and to talk with the King of Kings, Lord of Lords. Our brother mentioned this trip down to Florida. That was an interesting trip for us. And I'm aware that I'm on my preaching time, that you're not giving me so many minutes to preach and so many minutes to talk. So I know I'm on the clock. But back in those days, church meetings often went Sunday through Friday. And it was not unusual for us to be out almost every week of the year. One year, New Year's Day came on Sunday. I started a meeting, preached through Friday, traveled on Saturday, then followed with a meeting, did the same thing for 26 straight weeks. Went through on up into July the 4th. And some years I'd even preached July the 4th at a camp out in Wyoming. But this particular year our brother spoke about, I was in the Tidewater area of Virginia. Series of meetings, and we've been in meetings, it's been a while since we've been home. And somebody had to cancel a meeting. I'm not sure just what the reason was, a long time ago, and I've forgotten. And my wife said, what are we going to do? I said, well, the first thing, if you talk to anybody on the phone, don't tell them I have an open week. Because I need a rest. I don't need to preach. She said, where are we going? Going home? I said, no, that won't work. You know, home is also for the preacher a workplace. So you don't go home to rest. You get away from home if you can. And I said, there's a camp meeting down in Florida. She said, who do you know down there? I said, nobody. And the good thing is nobody knows me. So we'll just go. And we went. We're going to take the church, located a motel, and we arrived. I found that several people that either knew me or I knew them or we knew each other. One day the pastor stood up and he said, how many of you men have been in the ministry 10 years, 20, went on like that? And I've been in the ministry longer than anybody there. He said to me, before you leave this week, please stop and I will talk to you. But there were a lot of other things that happened, but this in particular, he gave me a check from his church that would have been the same as if I'd been preaching a week at a large church. Took care of the motel bill and all our meals at church. And I thought it's just good to serve the King. Amen. God can meet needs in any and every place. Since this is a mission conference, I want to just dwell on some of those things for just a moment. How many times we've seen God do the incredible, the impossible. Years ago in Kathy, that's a world-famous resort, and its main emphasis is to service Christians. You have thousands that go there every summer. It's a place there in England, and the name of the area is Kathy. But they have Bible conferences there all summer long. Well, one of the speakers in one of those meetings said, with faith, anything is possible. Now you understand, when you make a statement like that, anything or all things is within the will of God. You mean faith in the will of God. So with faith, all things in the will of God are possible. With love, all things are easy. Now that silences a lot of Christian complaining, doesn't it? Remember that picture you see of a boy carrying his baby brother on his back? And the caption says, he ain't heavy. He's my brother. Love makes a difference. Faith makes a difference. Last night we talked about, just briefly, the feeding of the 5,000. Those 5 loaves and those 2 fish. In the oven at Mama's house, those 5 loaves, and then that possibly pickled or smoked fish wouldn't feed 5,000. In Mama's hands wasn't enough. In little boy's basket wasn't enough. In Philip's hand wasn't enough. But in Jesus' hands had 12 baskets left over. He'll be no man's devil. Isn't that amazing? When we first started in this itinerant ministry, a lot of people encouraged us greatly. They said things like this: what are you going to do if you get in bad weather? How are you going to drive on snow and ice? And then, what if you have storms? I'm only trying to encourage you, kind of keep you going. There is a thing in the Bible, a subject taught in the Bible, that we not only know it's biblical, we see it actually in experience every day. It's called human depravity. We'll look at the negative and the no's, and we'll just say it ain't going to work. It's not going to happen. But in so many ways, we have seen God work in magnificent ways, unbelievable ways. I spoke at a major conference for Christian workers in Argentina. Delegates from 6 nations were there. I was the first speaker that ever had that was not a Hispanic. I had to have a translator. But my, how God moved. I've never seen services quite like that. I felt so humble. Here were people that had sacrificed paying a month's salary just for the travel and the hospitality of being in that conference. I received no income from the conference. They were not paying me. But they came forward, invitations last 30, 40, 50 minutes to an hour. I felt so humbled. I want to get down underneath in the basement and beneath those people. Didn't feel I was worthy to be on the same level with them. Incredible week like that, incredible. And when the week was over, I was just exhausted. My wife said, what are you going to do to get a little rest? I said, well, we have several hours in the airport in Buenos Aires. And don't let anybody know we're going to be there. Or some of these people will be coming there. So we flew across the state of Argentina, the nation of Argentina, from Mar del Plata all the way over to Buenos Aires. And just as I checked in, a missionary came up to me. He found out I would be there. He said, we thought you'd be lonely. And we brought a basket of food. Just wanted to spend time with you. And I'm a bit irritated inside and smiling outside. Now, I know you've never been that way. You wouldn't do that. But I did. I'm thinking, who told him I was going to be here? Didn't blame my wife. She wouldn't have done that. But there he was. And just as I checked our baggage, I went to look at those bags for several hours and started walking away. The lady at the counter said, Sir, please go ahead. You can't fly on that visa. My visa wasn't in order. On the same visa, I've been in Brazil many times. But on this day, I wasn't going to fly. She said, I'm sorry to tell you the American Embassy is closed today. It's a holiday. You'll be about 3 days getting out. Now, I've been griping that a man might take a little bit of my time. He said, 3 days. Why, that's wonderful, Dr. Mark. You can just stay at our house. I'll take you to the embassy. You don't have a problem, one. Isn't God a better organizer than we are? Amen. See, I'm organized to be alone. God knew I needed to have somebody with me besides my wife. So, they have an ulterior motive, but God can use that. This missionary wife had inherited money from her parents' estate. And they had been living in very primitive situation. So they had the money to fix up the house, put in modern plumbing, modern fixtures, have all of that. And this good lady had been out of civilization in a way so long she didn't know how to buy the stuff. And she wanted my wife to do that. And my wife loves to shop. And she'll be here tomorrow night, but don't you remember a thing I'm telling you, all right? You want the blessings of the speaker, you behave. But she loved it. And she bought refrigerator and stove and sink and cabinets and everything, all kinds of fixtures for the bathroom, and had a great time. And the missionary and I had one time of fellowship, got the visa taken care of, and had to have new pictures made. You know, if you travel, you know what you have to do. But you see, we like the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Hebrews, we forget so quickly, don't we? God's just done the impossible. Without me even thinking about it, didn't even know I needed it. He had everything I needed for me. What if I had to do that little translator that I didn't know? And pay somebody to translate and find a hotel, find a cab. Can you imagine all the stress? So now we're ready to fly, and we fly. We're going to Curitiba, Brazil. And Curitiba, I'm to speak at another conference, a major conference, but totally different from one in Argentina. They put us on a plane that we'd not anticipated flying on. They didn't know the airlines, it was a local airline. And my wife said, well, you know what we got to do, where we're going, and so on. Now, you ladies know you've never met a dumb man, have you? All men know where they're going. No need to have a road map and no need to ask instructions. I said, sure, I know where we're going. Don't worry about it. Got on a plane, and we'll go about 30 minutes and land. He said, where are we landing? I said, "Now, I guess we're chasing planes." "Well, where are we on the next plane?" "Oh, we don't worry about it. Just follow the crowd." And we started following the crowd, get this huge, big annex, big empty room. And half go this way, half this way. She said, "Which way are we going?" I said, "We'll just stand here now." So I'm just standing there and stop the prayer. And a man walks over, neatly dressed. Now wait a minute, I'll put a footnote in. I'm giving you just one little instance. I could write a 300-page book and not exhaust all the time. We've seen God do things like this. All the time. Incredible. And my friend, it never stops.
Amen.
Never stops. We have a grandson that we love more than life itself, and he's in Hong Kong. We have more peace about him being there in mission work than we do the other two grandchildren living here in the U.S. We worry about them, but we don't worry about him. We should pray for all of them. You sometimes worry about it. Well, standing there, a gentleman neatly dressed, you can tell he's a man of some wealth. His wife, the clothing indicates they have money. He walks over and he says, in English, he says, "Sir, can I help you?" I said, you really can. I'm needing to go to Curitiba, Brazil. He gets so excited. He said, "That's where I live. I'm a dentist there. I'll be glad to help you get there. By the way, you can stay at our house if you need to. And I can take you wherever you need to go." I said, "Sir, some people have been waiting there for me for 3 days. They were expecting me 3 days ago. I'll not need any help once I get there, but I just need to know which airplane to get on." He said, "Well, tell me what I'm getting on." And this man said, "My wife and I just got married. We're on our honeymoon in Argentina." Now, can you imagine an American on the honeymoon who would interrupt what he's doing and invite a total stranger to spend time at his house? How did I start this thing? With faith, all things are what? Possible. With love, all things are easy. Now, as I thought of these things today, I'm thinking, I hope the people who are listening will be translating this into their faith promise commitment, their prayer for missionaries, their encouragement for missionaries, and their outreach here in this Spirit community. That it's not just stories the preacher's telling, but it's life experiences everybody can have. God doesn't just do this in Argentina and Brazil. He does it in Henry County. Amen. But without faith, it's impossible to please God. What's possible? With faith, all things are possible. What a difference. So we thank the gentleman. I explained to him I need no help other than getting on the plane. But as we were chatting, I said to him, "I find it very interesting that you would do what you did. Would you mind telling me where you learned English?" He said, "You probably wouldn't know the place, but it's a little town in North Carolina named Chapel Hill. It's where I went to dental school." Now, do you think God doesn't have a sense of humor as well as Austin Powell? How far back did he go to begin answering my prayer? When this guy picked out of dental school, did all this go into it? One day I'll have a preacher needing directions and somebody that speaks English with a southern accent? And I'll have it right in place. No, and listen, I'm just an ordinary guy. I just happen to be in the King's army. He takes care of all of his troops. again and again and again. 100 miles from home, in a distant land, with nobody to help me but God. I found He's enough. There's a song we sing that goes with what I just stated. Trust and obey. For there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Look at your Bible, please, the Gospel of John chapter 12. Now I'm going to preach 30 minutes. I've been preaching. I just didn't labor that so you would listen. I'm laughing. I'm just teasing. John chapter 12. You know the story in chapter 11 of of Lazarus. Look please at verse 10. John 12, verse 10. But the chief priests consulted that they might put Lazarus also to death. What does that mean? These people had an organized plan to put Jesus Christ to death. And now Lazarus is so identified with Christ. He's been raised from the dead. He's so identified with Christ. They're making the same plan for Lazarus. We're going to kill him. Of course, they didn't have that opportunity. But what is the reason for it? Because that by reason of him, many of the Jews went away and believed on Jesus. That then just leads us to a question. Are you a good reason for trusting Jesus Christ? A good reason for trusting him. Would my life, would your life create an appetite for people to know Christ? It was a country church. Young boy speaking was from the city. Freshman in Bible college. And after 3 or 4 weeks in Bible college, he thought he knew everything. And he stood up there and said to a group of farmers, "You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink." Old farmer in the back said, "Son, you give him some salt, he'll sure drink." You ponder that, Lord. Christ said, "You are the salt of the earth." Salt creates an appetite for food. That's why you keep eating those wretched potato chips. It's not because the potato's good, not because the potato's good for you. Both would be wrong. But because it's been baptized in salt, your body says they got to have more. And it plays a little trick on you. They know that. If you stop and drink the water, you wouldn't keep eating the chips. But the more salt, the more salt. People want more and more of Jesus if they can just get him. And we ought to create an appetite for him. If the salt has lost its saltiness, that's the literal translation, if it's lost its saltiness, it's henceforth good for nothing. And when in the ancient world the salt lost its saltiness, people used it to fill in the ruts in the road. It's good for nothing but to walk on. Have we not reached that point in history? When the church is looked upon as just something to walk on, Christians something to walk on, something to spit on, the salt has lost its saltiness. God help us to have a fresh walk with God that would rejuvenate us, anoint us afresh with fresh oil, that we might attract others to Jesus Christ. All over the world, in now 49 countries, I have seen arrangements made for me that Fortune 500 companies cannot make for their personnel. Mine. One concluding thing. We were riding across western Canada. Canada's highway is Trans-Canada #1. we're riding across. We entered Canada just beyond Chicago, up in Winnipeg, Ontario, Winnipeg, Manitoba. And while we go in a car, had a little 75 O's Omega. And we'd taken the back seat out and had it like a closet back there, carrying supplies. We could have flown. We had to go to British Columbia for meetings. But I said, honey, let's do survey work. We need to see just where the churches are and how many Baptist churches as we go through these provinces. And once we left Manitoba, we were almost out of civilization. There's so few people living there. And the land is so flat in Saskatchewan, so very flat. Wherever you look, it's like you see the curvature of the earth. And every day, every new day is like a digital mark of yesterday. And keep in mind, my wife and I were born on the same street, 4 houses from each other, always know one another, played together as children, went to the same school, same church, married. She was 19, I was 21, but we dated 3 years before that, but we've always been together. And here we're all riding along in that car, day after day. She said, honey, talk to me. I said, dear, I told you everything I know. She said, make up something and tell me. Then I had a soliloquy. You know what a soliloquy is? Where you talk to yourself. But you wouldn't get up before well-educated people and say, I was talking to myself. Because our parents told us that's what crazy people do. But like in Shakespeare, in Hamlet, when he talked to himself, they called it a soliloquy. So if you talk to yourself and say it that way, you might be off a little bit. But if you have a soliloquy, you're brilliant. I had a soliloquy. I thought, why am I in this car? I could be in an airplane, and I work for a little independent Baptist mission board that nobody knows about. If I work for, and I named some big organizations and etc., I said, when I get to Regina, Saskatchewan, the mayor would meet me. The television people would be there. I don't have to worry about where I'm going to stay. The whole town would be ready. That's what I thought. That's why we would talk to ourselves. You think God has a sense of humor? We get to Regina. Not as soon as we'd anticipated. We had to stay at a motel on the highway rather than going in late one night. So the next morning we go. And the next morning, as we enter the city, I'm aware that the city is kind of, the streets laid out like one huge square block. And here we're coming in. We're coming from the east, and we're in the south corner of the east. And we go in, and there is a station undertaken by the government to provide information for tourists. And then my wife, I said, I think I'll go in, get instruction. She said, I can't believe this. You're asking for instruction. I said, well, we'll go in and just check, see what they have. We go in and have coffee with them, donuts. And they're so kind and so friendly, I think they just want to hear my southern accent. And I'm asking instructions and directions, and they just keep talking. They said, would you like to have another donut? And I'm thinking, I'll have to buy breakfast today. And the third donut, the lady said, could you wait just a little bit longer? I said, why? She said, today is the first official day of the tourist season. And we have 4 of these tourist information stations at the 4 corners of the city. The arrangement is wherever the first visitor comes, to detain that person if you can, and all the visitors will get to that spot, and we have some gifts and some recognition to provide for you. Can you wait a few more minutes? And I'm thinking, yes. And then she says, it's too small to do it in this building. It was a rather large building. She said, we have to go out to the parking lot. We go out. Here's a huge crowd of people. Here's a huge truck with its antennas and the name of the television station. And the lady says to me, I should like to introduce you to the mayor of Regina. And I greet the mayor, take his hand, hand to him from the city. And I say to him, kind of dumbfounded, sir, my friends aren't going to believe this. Please, could somebody take my wife's camera and get a picture of us together? They won't believe it then, I don't think. And then the lady says, now to represent the provincial government, and introduced me to the top official. And to represent the nation of Canada, here's the head of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And I thought, as a little boy, I'd like to see just one mountie. Now I guess to meet the head of the thing. And he says, we're having close order drills today, a special parade in your honor, and you'll be the guest of the barracks. You'll eat in our place, and then you'll see the troops on review. We go through all of that. But before that begins to take place, a man comes up running, his wind blowing his hair. He said, sir, I'm so sorry I'm a bit late. Got targeted in traffic. I have the nicest, lowest hotel in the nation, in the province. You'll have a suite of rooms in our place tonight. And it's like the Lord said, now, who else did you need to meet out here on the edge of the city? And in my mind, I'm thinking, I told the Lord if I worked for a big organization, I'd have all this. It's like he's saying, you work for the biggest organization there is.
Amen.
I know it's a Monday. I know you came to church tired. I'm trying to be light and yet serious. In faith, all things are possible.
Amen.
With love, all things are easy. The God who can is the God who did. And the cross is empty, and the tomb is empty, and the throne is occupied, and now the invitation is presented. Ask in my name, and you shall receive. I worked in a little town not too far away, down in Eden, North Carolina. Used to call Nixon. I remember one time, my dad had a shoe repair shop right on Main Street, and as a little boy, I would spend most of my time in that shop. But I'd also meander around. I'd go in the back door of any store, every store. I guess people in town thought I was a brat. But I would go there and spoil them, and they seemed to appreciate me and tolerate me. But I go to the police station, the fire station, just to say hello. I remember once, the fire truck had a flat. If memory serves me right, the tire stayed flat for 1 month. You say, what kind of fire department do you have? Well, we had one man that stayed there all day, 12 hours. He went home, and another man came and stayed 12. The only time they did anything was if the phone rang. They'd answer. Fortunately, there was no fire that month. One of the local businessmen learned about it, and the outcome of that was that everybody on the town board of commissioners got voted out. New group put in. During that same interval, one of those businessmen, knowing the habits of the man working the night shift on the police department, that he really didn't serve as a policeman, he slept. Stole the police car, moved it a half a block and parked it, and it took them 2 or 3 days to find it. Now, I just described two things. I described a very low point of civic responsibility in my little hometown, with a police car stolen and a fire truck with a flat tire. I said two things. Also described something else that hadn't been stated. I described the actual mission activity of the average church. We know it can be done, but faith requires action. It's an action word. An action word. Believe is an action word. Something is happening. Missions can never function like a volunteer fire department that people wait until something is burning and then to go check on it. We've got to be proactive. We begin now. All around us in this county, yes. I know the difficulties. This is my home area. But there are men and women without Christ on the way to hell. And it requires personal contact. A surrendered life. A surrendered will. Lips that speak for Jesus, feet that walk for him. Amazing what can happen. Amazing when we just put forth a little effort. A little effort. A little effort. Maybe there's a family down the street and they don't like people. They're hard to get along with. Just make a nice pie and take it down and give it to the lady. That I made one for my family and one for your family. Sometimes you have to slowly open the door. But faith makes it possible, and love makes it easy.